Hi, I'm Sarikula. We're talking today about balls and what balls you should use with muscle release. It seems that absolutely everyone these days wants to use muscles. They want to do some trigger points, they want to do releases, whether you're just at home and you've heard that they can help, or whether you're someone like a personal trainer or an instructor, so Pilates instructor. It seems to be really, really commonplace. Okay. So these are the most sort of common balls that people use. They'll generally either have something very simple like a tennis ball. You might have something that looks a little bit like this, which is like a massage ball. It's a little bit softer. Some people use lacrosse balls or cricket balls, and then obviously you've got your spiky ball. So what's the difference? To be honest, the smaller ball like this is a little bit kinder if it's softer. It's obviously kinder and what have you and user friendly to use, but the softer it is, the less impact it has. So if you're using it, say, on your glutes, so I'm using it on my glutes this way, it's nice and soft. It is quite small, so it has a small surface area, but the fact that it's soft means that it feels quite comfortable. If I then went to a small hard ball and put that on, that's a little bit more in your face. It's obviously it's a little bit nastier. So when you're using something like this, your progression would be from soft to hard. Okay, so small area, small contact point, a little bit more, a little bit more delicate, a little bit like if you think about things when you see the elephant footprint, big surface area, big contact area, so less pressure, as opposed to the stiletto, which is small pinpoint pressure. So think about your small balls like that, small pinpoint pressure that can be a little bit more sort of specific. When you're moving into like the bigger balls, same sort of principle. The softer it is, the more diffuse the area is that you're going to be working with. And something like the spiky ball, obviously it's still bigger, but it's got obviously different indents. So it's going to try and hit different trigger points. I personally don't generally like these spiky balls only because they ruin your mats. If you've got them against a wall, they create a little bit of a mark and what have you when you walk. So just be wary about that. If you're not bothered and you're not bothered about your mat, then it's not such a big deal. But lots and lots of people do love spiky balls, and obviously they could be half that size to double that size. So that's sort of the range that we're sort of looking at. And I would generally advise people to go from a sort of a softer version towards the hard version. And if you're looking at some of the specialist balls and you're buying them, say, from places like Rebel or from Black Roll or some of the other places that sell like their specialists, that's what they are there for, then you're obviously going to be paying a fair whack of money for them as well, so you need to look after them. I generally get most people started on the tennis ball. I've found that it's the easiest way to get used to it. It's not a massive outlay. People don't mind having 8 lying around the house, one next to their chair, one next to their bed, one in their car, one in the office. It's not something that is massively cost ineffective. You can have them lying all over the place, and if you find that it helps you and it works for you, then it's a great way to work out whether that's the way forward for you. And then as you progress, you might then want to invest in something a little bit more sturdy. We've had obviously heaps of clients use them, like from lacrosse balls to cricket balls to sort of baseballs to rugby balls. There's a whole sort of remit of stuff that you can be using, but the general focus would be start with something a little bit softer, potentially softer and maybe smaller, and then go up into a little bit more density as you progress. And obviously, the smaller the ball is, the more specific it is. So if somebody is a bit gentle or a bit sort of sensitive, you might be better off doing a slightly bigger ball with a bit more soft diffuse area until they sort of get used to it. And I have heard people sort of saying, oh, make it as hard as you can, make it as uncomfortable as you can, just tolerate it as much as you can. I would sort of argue and say, look, it wants to be around about a discomfort level of 5 or 6 out of 10, because if you're leaning on something and it really hurts, you're going to actually tense off it. So the idea is to make the muscle let go and relax. And if you're so sore that you're tensing off it, you're not going to have that effect. So I would go around about 5 or 6 out of 10 a comfortable discomfort that you can tolerate and something that you could actually relax into. If you then find that you can increase it, then you can obviously do a little bit more, and there's something you can work on. Say your pinpoint area is here and it really really hurts, then maybe what you want to do is start away and move in, or start away and move in. So if that center point is really uncomfortable, maybe go around in a clock sort of area, so that you have something that you can work towards and you can work into. So I would start soft, whatever size works for you, soft, and increase it to work into something harder, and start away working into your sort of pinpoint tightness or pinpoint area of sensitivity. And the other thing to be aware of is, why are you doing it? What's the purpose? Is it because the muscle is in spasm and you're trying to release it, so it is like a trigger point release? Is it that the muscle, you're trying to get some length in it? And so it is sort of very important about when you're using your ball as well. Are you using it sort of as you fatigue out and you just want a bit of release and a bit of relief, so you're using it on your shoulders and your back, in which case it will help you last that little bit longer? Are you looking at doing some release work before you exercise, so you can get a bit of stretch and a bit of range in there? In which case, if you're doing release work, you want to be then looking at something more like dynamic stretching before you go into your workload. And then at the end of it, if you're worried and you're thinking, look, I'm doing release work for whatever reason because it's part of my recovery, then what you're doing is trying to get some fluid and blood flow and things through the area. So think about being a bit strategic in when you do it and why. What are you trying to achieve? Because if you're releasing a whole heap of stuff and making things feel a bit squidgy and stretchy, and then you're going to try and go out and do something really dynamic and what have you, make sure you're prepped to do that. If you're doing something like you want to do releases on the roller or a ball post exercise, then also make sure that you're flushing through any toxins. So you've actually done a bit of a warm down and a cool down. You've done your releases, you're drinking plenty of water, and maybe you're walking things out, so you've still got that flow and that circulation. And the other thing is, if you're doing your releases because, say, your piriformis is working really, really hard and holding you up, and you want it to be actually glute med or glute min that is active instead, which is quite common, then what you want to be doing is releasing your piriformis so that that muscle isn't working quite as hard, but then activating glute med, because what's the point of taking something away and then not giving your body back something to replace it? So releases are really, really good. I'm not saying they're not. Sometimes they're overdone, but think about strategic releasing as well. If you're trying to release it because you're working too hard, then are you also addressing your posture? Are you also addressing something else that might be at fault? If you're trying to release it because you're trying to get some recovery, then also make sure you're doing all the other things, like potentially wearing recovery pants, recovery skins, and also drinking plenty of fluid. And if you're trying to release it because you then want to activate something else, then make sure you release it so that overactive muscle is released, but then on top of that, you've activated the muscle that's deficient. All right, so start soft, build up into a little bit harder as that works. I would probably, if you're new to it, make sure you're doing it for the right reasons. So make sure you've been checked out first, and you know why you're doing it. And think about maybe 2 minutes, 5 minutes. Don't go crazy, because it will release a lot of toxins. You might find it feels a bit throbby and a bit achy in the area, and that's because you're going to get a sudden influx of blood flow as the tissues sort of open up and the sort of circulation gaps through. As the muscle relaxes as well, you might find that you've lost some stability, so you might feel a little bit wobbly. And then the other thing is, because it is a bit of toxin release, you might get that headache. So you might find you feel a bit queasy, a bit nauseous, a bit headachy, and that's really when you want to make sure that you've got plenty of fluid in your system. Okay, so a little bit of a tip on trigger points, trigger balls, trigger release, or myofascial release if you're using a roller instead. Think about the why are you doing it, and are you doing it at the right time, and are you doing it at the right time in the right order to achieve the results you're after. It really is being strategic and working out what it is you think you want. So start slow, be kind to yourself, don't go sort of rushing around and doing this on your ball. You want to make sure that you hold it, give the tissues a chance to adapt and let go, because when you're doing that sort of let's irritate it and find a spot where we see lots and lots of people moving quite quickly, you're probably actually stimulating it. So unless that's your point, you want to stimulate it, go for your life. But most of the time, if we're using balls, we're trying to get them to let the muscle let go. Okay, hope you find that helpful. It's stuff that we will cover in some of our online courses as well. So hopefully that will give you a little bit of a tip for the day, when you should use your trigger pull balls, what you should be doing, and what type of ball might work best for you. Take care.